Thank you for joining us. We are at the Hilton Orlando for the Jewish National Fund National Conference. And our special guest today is Mr. Bob Levine. He will share his views on the Jewish National Fund and all the essential work it has performed throughout the history of the State of Israel, following these messages. With us now is Mr. Bob Levine. It's a pleasure to have you on the Shalom Show.
Likewise, thank you.
Quite a privilege. You've been involved with JNF, good Lord, for quite a few years. Tell us about it.
Well, I've told the story many times. I went to Israel in 1968, which was my second trip to Israel. My first trip was in 1951 when Israel was 3 years old as the leader of the first teenage tour to Israel, taking a group of young Judea kids to Israel on that trip. Came back in 68 and it was a completely different country. It was a shock to me. I came back in 68 as a married man with 3 kids and spent 2 months in Israel. And one of the highlights of my trip was a flight to Eilat from Tel Aviv. I had been to as far south as Beersheba in the 1951 trip, and it was a little tiny hamlet, as I called it. You forgive the word ham in that expression. But when we flew over it in our little Archaea plane, it was just amazing to me to see the growth of the city. After passing over Beersheba, we flew a little further, and I looked down out the plane window, and there is this huge green patch in the middle of the desert. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe that I had seen this. And I turned to everyone on the plane, the Israelis sitting next to me, "What's that down there?" And they couldn't care less. They were in it, "I don't know, don't bother me," and puffing on their cigarettes, which was the style at that time. Got back to Jerusalem after a wonderful time in Eilat and spoke to my sister who had made Aliyah earlier. And she said, "Why don't you walk over to KKL and have them possibly tell you what it was?" So I did that. I walked over to the KKL headquarters on King George Street, and some very nice man was assigned to help me. And he pulls out a map, and he shows me the route that my plane had taken. Here's Beersheba, and see this green one. This is the green spot right on the. I said, "Yeah, that's it. What is it?" He says, "That's the Yatir Forest." I said, "The Yatir Forest, was that in the Bible? I don't remember that." He said, "No, it wasn't in the Bible." I said, "Well, how'd it get there?" And he said to me, "One tree at a time." I said, "You're telling me a forest got into the middle of the desert, one tree at a time?" He says, "Yeah." Well, I heard that story, and it's lived with me forever, and that made me dedicated to go back to the United States. And I said, if people can plant the forest one tree, and that they need help from us. And so in my community locally, we got an active JNF chapter going. Then I got involved regionally in the state of New Jersey, and eventually, through various steps of maneuvering, I was put onto the national board of JNF, which was in about 1971 or 1972, and I've had the privilege of serving JNF ever since then on a national level. I've served as a national treasurer, I've been the national campaign chair, I presently serve in the position of chairman of the Department of Education, vice president for education of JNF. And I'm very concerned. Everyone thought that fundraising was the most difficult chore, and it was a difficult chore, and I love doing it. But I felt that the biggest concern I had was the future generations, and without education of our young people, it'll be harder and harder to raise funds in the future, so I asked if I could be assigned to education, and that's where I am today, in that department.
You followed Israel's destiny for many years, and you've seen amazing accomplishments. And I was just discussing with Minister Erdan how, unfortunately, the media worldwide singles Israel out for criticism, and they do not hardly mention the amazing achievements of the State of Israel. Tell us a little bit about those.
I see Israel through JNF eyes because it has really been such an awakening experience for me. I remember one of my early trips and learning about desert agriculture and experimentation. I was with a group of JNF people on a mission to Israel that I was leading, and we went to a station in Beersheba. It was so primitive. They showed us 10 rows of seeds in a row, and the first row had a sign on it said 10, the next one said 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. And those signs indicated that there was the degree of salt in the water. So the 10 meant 10% salt, 90% fresh water. And the 80 meant 80% salt and 20%. So that it was an experiment simply to see how much salt can a plant bear and still thrive under those circumstances. And they figured out at that time, the experiment with the seeds they were using, they could use 70% salt water and still get tomatoes to grow. And that meant a tremendous thing, because using salt water instead of fresh water meant a huge saving for the crops of Israel. And I saw this very primitive agricultural research beginning and said, they're on to something. Today you go to the research stations and you see the most sophisticated things being developed. New crops, new generations of fruits and vegetables, and now even growing tropical fish that has been experimented with in the laboratories of the JNF Research Department, and now there are farmers in the Negev and the Araba Valley who are growing fish as a crop to sell.
Mr. Levine, one of the great achievements of the State of Israel and JNF is that of drip irrigation. Tell us about it.
That's a fascinating subject. Drip irrigation was developed in Israel by some farmers on a kibbutz not far from Beersheba, and they came up with the idea of running plastic pipe along the furrows where they were planting their seeds, because they were so concerned about the use of water, and they wanted to conserve as much as possible. And the technique was so simple. They simply pricked a hole in the plastic pipe, in the plastic tubing, so when the water ran through the tube, it would only drip onto the ground where the little prick hole was made. And at that point, the seed would be nourished, and between the seeds, if you put the seeds 6 inches apart, the 5 inches between had no weeds, because no water reached those weeds. So there couldn't be any weeds, and so only the plants thrived. And it was an amazing invention. If you needed 8 inches, you just put the whole 8 inches apart. And the whole technique became brilliant and practical. And on top of that, I mean, the whole world is now buying the piping, the plastic tubing from the Netivot, which is the manufacturer of the plant, of the tubing. And then came the second development, which was plastic housing, plastic hothouses over the plants. And when we were in Israel and saw our first group of plastic houses, we walked in, it was like 100 degrees inside those buildings during the daytime or more. And we said, why do you enclose the farm? It's, you're blocking the sun and it's so hot. And they said, no, you don't understand. Our issue is water. And the key to the Middle East is water. By building these hothouses, during the day, whatever water drips on the ground, whatever evaporates rises. And when it rises, it hits the roof of the hothouse. And then at night, when it gets very cold in the desert, that water drops again to the ground. So we get a second and a third use of the same water. It was just a brilliant scheme, a brilliant invention, which is now being copied also around the world as a farming development to help grow food for people wherever, including in the harshest, most difficult circumstances, like in the desert.
You've been following the destiny of the State of Israel for all of these years, and you've witnessed so many exciting events. What final message would you like to share with our audience at this time?
The thing that has impressed me the most, and I've been to Israel many, many times, as you say. My next trip will be my 86th trip to Israel. And in all those years, from 1951, which was my first, till today, the scientific development, the changes in the way people live, in the use of water in general, the different ways that water is gathered today, the way the economy has blossomed, the way the farmers we talked about, let's not forget the high tech that has developed in that. Because of their army training and the need to develop techniques for the military, great developments have come about. I mean, the cell phone and all the other electronic devices we use today would not be there if it were not for the Israeli developments. So seeing Israel grow as a modern democratic society, I travel through Arab sections, Jewish sections. It's just a beautiful country physically. For anyone who's never visited Israel, they would get the shock of their lives to travel in the 300-mile range from a snow-capped mountain to an absolute desert in the south. To be on borders with Jordan and feel very comfortable and safe, knowing that there is a peace treaty at the present time and has been for years, thanks to water. If it weren't for water, there wouldn't have been a peace treaty with Jordan. And it's thanks to a client of mine who was a donor to the JNF. This gentleman met right after the signing of the peace treaty with I shouldn't say the peace treaty, yeah, with Arafat and Rabin shook hands on the White House lawn. It was September 13th, 1993. And we were all watching it on TV and so pleased that now maybe there will be peace in the Middle East. Finally, we will have that comfort. And this gentleman, client of mine, came and met Moshe Rivlin, who was then the world chairman of KKL. And I said, Moshe, tell this gentleman what we could do if he had some money. He said, well, what we would do is we'd build reservoirs. He said, really, you would build reservoirs? I said, yes, we would, as many as we could. Because how would you do it, my client asked. And he said, well, we dig little ridges down, little channels down the side of mountains. And when it does rain in the rainy season, we let that water come down those channels into a big pit that we line with plastic, and that's a reservoir. And they can either grow fish in it or use it for their farming. And he said, well, that sounds like a great solution. Why don't you do lots of it? He says, well, unfortunately, it costs money. And we don't have the money to do it. And this client gave a substantial sum of money to help build a reservoir, which exists in his name at Negev on the Jordanian border. But when we had the discussion, my client said to Rivlin, he said, Moshe, why don't we do it half in Israel and half in Jordan? Let the farmers in Jordan share the water with the farmers in Israel. And that would help bring people together. This man was not a Zionist. He was not an active Jew, but he was a man with vision. And Moshe said, we'd love to, but, we don't even have a peace border with Jordan. We can't do that. He said, all right, then if you can't do that, if you want my money, you got to build it right on the border. I want the fence to be where the reservoir ends. So that he said, why do you want to do that? He said, I want the Jordanian farmers to see this water and to say to their leaders, how come the Israelis farmers can have water and we can't? He says, okay, that I can do for you. And that's where it's built. The border of the reservoir today is right on the border with Jordan. 6 months later, there's a phone call at KKL headquarters from the Minister of the Interior of Jordan. And he's calling up and saying, KKL, our farmers are screaming for help. We want reservoirs. Could you show us how to do it? And KKL said, we'd love to, but our two countries don't have a peace treaty. Well, speak to the foreign ministry, and then we'll be happy to help you. And shortly thereafter, a call came to the foreign ministry of Israel. And from that discussion came the peace treaty. And if you read the peace treaty with Jordan, first paragraph says we recognize each other. The second paragraph says we will exchange ambassadors. The third paragraph says we will define the border between Israel and Jordan from the Dead Sea to the Red Sea, because it was desert there, and technically the border moved every time the low point of the valley moved because of the way the rains came off the mountain sides. And finally, so that was resolved. And the fourth paragraph says Israel will give Jordan 500 million cubic meters of water a year. And that was done by the way they siphon it off that's why the Jordan River is now the Jordan Creek, because before it gets to the Jordan Valley, it's siphoned off in northern Jordan and by meters so that they get their 500 million cubic meters of water. And nobody will ever know this, and I'm not going to tell the gentleman's name on the air, but he is the man, in my opinion, who caused the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan because of his vision and his understanding of human nature and having that reservoir come right up to the border. It's a fascinating story. That man had never been to Israel, got to Israel only 8 years later to dedicate his reservoir because he thought it was too dangerous to come to Israel. When he came without his wife, and when he was there in Israel for the first time, he says, oh, what an idiot I am. I didn't bring my wife with me because I thought it wasn't safe to be there. So, I mean, these are the sidebars that being involved with JNF has brought me to meet people and be in situations that are just beyond belief. And all credit to this visionary friend of mine who put his money where his mouth was, but had a vision and knew that it had to be done in a proper way. And so, to me, that was always been a memory that I will share. And every time I see this friend of mine, I just shake his hand and clasp him to my heart, because I feel personally that it gave me a chance to participate in history in a very small way, but a very significant way. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would say, in terms of the many recollections I have in my many trips, is one day we were traveling with a group of tourists from America for JNF through the Arava Desert in the Negev. And on this trip with us, we took with us the Dry Bones cartoonist. And he was with us making commentary along the way. And he's sitting next to me on the bus as we're traveling through the Negev and seeing the farms that have developed and the agriculture. And he says, you know, you guys don't understand what you're doing. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he said, Do you know the names? Bob, you seem to know a lot about Zionists. Do you know names of any of the people who drained the Hula swamps and who died from malaria or whatever from the dangers of that project, but they were building a nation? We call them chalutzim, he said. They were pioneers, but no one knows their name. You Americans today, with your dollars and the work you're doing in desert agriculture and other things you've done, security roads and all the other things you've done around the country of Israel, you're also chalutzim. And no one's ever going to know your name, but Israel's going to be a better state for it because of what you guys contributed as your volunteerism. And the last thing he said is, I'm going to draw a cartoon. And he did. And the next day that cartoon appeared. And it showed a man holding a pen in his hand. And the legend said, the pen is mightier than the sword when it writes a check to the Jewish National Fund.
What a wonderful story. I want to thank you so very much for being with us today and all that you do for Jewish National Fund and for the State of Israel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure being with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll be right back.
Commitment, pledge.
It makes you feel a responsibility to the people and to the land.
We must do more.
Every Jew must be involved.
One of the great achievements in my life that I was able to give what I gave.
We can't stop.
And I knew about the trees, but I think just the many, many different projects that there are.
We must keep Israel strong.
I thought, what can my small donation really do?
They are the keepers of the land of Israel.
Can't describe the feeling of fulfillment.
Not tomorrow, today.
We can't take it for granted that Israel will always be there unless we do something to ensure that it's always going to be there.
The country is still developing.
I have a sense of responsibility to support our country.
They really need us, we need them.
We all must give, everyone.
It is a blessing to be part of it.
Donation.
America and Israel share a lot of the same values.
Alona was my first cousin, and she was on the second plane that crashed. The family was in shock. This memorial is very important to us. It means that no one forgot her. America means like a big brother to Israel, and JNF means a lot to us and to Israel also.
It takes 15 seconds till the time that the missile explodes, and the children have no ability to hide themselves in shelter. This is the reason that the GenF built this place. Before the GenF built this facility, these children have no other possibility to play and to be happy and to be like children all over the world without this indoor playground that the GenF built for them.
You have to understand that Mount Carmel is a special site, a nature reserve and forest, and it's like a sanctuary for Israelis. We fought here for 2 days.
It was like an umbrella of fire. It spread so fast and the wind was so strong. It was the first time that firefighters sacrificed their lives. 44 people lost their life. You were despair to find out that all what you fought for is already burned. Together with the help of the Jewish National Fund and the Israeli government, we are building our own brand new fire services.
We, the foresters of GenF, KKL, are helping the forest to recover.
After the war, we started to bring illegal immigration to Israel. The British catch most of the ships. And then they send them here to the camp. After released from the Auschwitz, one hope they got to come to Palestine and they created Jewish state. This was the camp with the people without any future, and the British catch them and put them here every step we fought. And this is one of the symbol of our fighting. If they lose the history, they will lose the future as well.
In this National Memorial Site, we tell the whole story, how Jerusalem was united. Here, 110 Israeli soldiers fought against 130 Jordanians. It was the Israeli greatest victory in the Israeli history.
I fought 4 hours. I was wounded. I lost a lot of my friends. I appreciate in the United States you support projects like this. I think it's a very, very important thing. And when you help this place, you help this spirit.
Within 20 or 30 years, we will not be able to drink water. We have to develop new water resources in order to be able to survive. This well that we are looking at is a new water resource. The water that comes up is supplying water to the Kinneret, and from the Kinneret it goes to the central part of Israel to keep agriculture.
With the aid of the Shamir drill, we can raise fish. Our community will have a livelihood.
Without the help of the JNF, we will not be able to have any agriculture, and we will not be able to drink water.
They are the weakest members in our society.
It's not a hospital. You're in a village. To give them a normal life. You're living here. That's your house.
We wanted to create a future of hope for Iran, our loved son, and for children like him. The only solution is holistic environment. Everyone who donates to JNF and this project, it says a lot as a human being to be sensitive, loving for this population.
Ben-Gurion said at the end of the 50s that the strength of the Jewish nation will be tested in the Negev.
I fought in the war in Gaza, I fought in the war in Lebanon. We were released from the army, and then we asked ourselves, what is our connection to this land? It was desert, it was neglected part of Israel. But for us, we saw cities, we saw communities, we saw life. It's people from America that says we believe in you. We are going to help you. It's housing, it's education, it's jobs. We call it the full package. Together with the JNF, we are going to bring these 300,000 people to the Negev that will bring life.
We are about 1 kilometer from the Jordanian border. From our experience since 1948, we know if we're not here, then other people are here. The villages, the moshavim and the kibbutzim, that will be the borders of Israel. The biggest issue is the doctor issue. We have here today only one doctor, and for example, now he's in vacation, so we don't have a doctor. It's very risky, and we need to bring down more medical staff to here. One of the things that we are doing is building a new medical center together with the JNF. I think this is the main mission today of the Jewish people around the world, to bring people to these areas.
Once we left Gush Katif, this was a very traumatic feeling. And when we came here for a tour before, there was nothing here. No electricity, no roads, no water, only sand and sand. That's what we found here. The JNF, all over this year, this is like they say in Hebrew, Sofa Olam Smola. This is the end of the world left. This is here. Here for a tour before, no electricity, no roads, no water, only sand and sand. That's what we found. And we believe that this desert can become green.
The Beersheba River Park is not just a project, it's a vision to change the city of Beersheba, to change the Negev, to make it a very attractive place for people to live in. When JNF America join into this project, we see developers, we see people come to live in an area that nobody lived before because it was neglected. And the Beersheba River Park is now green because of JNF America. We are still a long way to go.
We must do more.
GenF is the organization who initiates.
The people of the state of Israel need you as our partners.
Pledge.
Commitment. Future.
Promise.
Dedication.
Having usable water means life.
It's a huge operation. You need as much resources as you can get.
The brave firefighters need brand new equipment.
America means like a big brother to Israel.
I made a difference.
And Jews all around the world, they need us to settle this region.
Any little bit, I think, can help.
In a few years, you will see here like paradise.
They are the keepers of the land of Israel.
This concludes our special show for today for the Jewish National Fund. I'm Richard Peritz. Thank you for being with us.